Okay, so folks, the stories of Super Bowl champions are always fascinating. Always. After all, some of them even come from the relative obscurity of Alaska and the 10th round in the draft to not only thrive, but to become a two-time Pro Bowler, three-time Super Bowl champion, media analyst sans parallel, and genuinely top bloke. Sometimes they happen to just be our next guest. Today, delighted to be joined by Mark Schlereth, Stink in the house. Mark, an honor to speak to you again. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. Things are good, man. I'm excited for this game. I'm excited for the Super Bowl. It's Super Bowl 55. So I just turned 55 the other day. So my birthday coincides with the Super Bowl. And here's a little known fact. I might be the only guy. Well, I'm the only guy that I know of. It doesn't mean I'm the only guy, but I'm the only guy that I know of. I'm probably the only guy in history. I know I'm the only guy in history to win Super Bowl 32 on his 32nd birthday. So I actually played in Super Bowl 32 on my 32nd birthday. It was January 25th, 1998. So I'm sure other guys have won the Super Bowl on their birthday, but not the Super Bowl of, not the Super Bowl of the age of their birthday. So I got to be the only guy in history to do that.
I love that there, man. I love that there. And
Yeah.
we're talking about that Super Bowl and even about your career and that game in a second. But Mark, I ask everybody this, especially people coming on from the States, any Irish connections? Obviously, we're on the Irish NFL show. Any ties to Ireland at all?
Well, as a matter of fact, yeah. So my daughter is really best buddies with Bono's daughter. And so have you ever seen Bono without his sunglasses on? Because I have, because my daughter's had them on. So I've gone to a couple shows. I've never gotten to meet him, but I'm just a huge U2 fan. And so I've gotten through my daughter, I've gotten to go to a bunch of shows. I haven't met the band yet, but I look forward to that day because obviously the soundtrack of my college days is, and that's all I listen to anyhow, 80s music. So they're a big part of the soundtrack of my today as well.
Now, Mark, as Michael mentioned in the intro, you're the first born and raised Alaskan. I know there are some guys with military family backgrounds who played, but you're the first born and raised to play in the NFL. But your journey to the league, I know you've talked to us before about the decision came down to Hawaii or Idaho. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about making that decision and your time in college and towards the league.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure Ireland, the pictures I've seen, it's beautiful, right? But I'm sure there's a lot of gray and rainy weather, and that's my imagination. I know that it's gorgeous and I know that it's beautiful, but I know you guys get some kind of piston sideways rain occasionally, right? And that's what I grew up in Alaska. I mean, to me, a perfect day is 55 and drizzly, right? I mean, I think oh my God, it's a great day. And so, coming out of Alaska, there was two things that I was concerned about. One, we played 6 or 7 games when I was in high school. That was our season. And there wasn't a lot of competition because, I was gifted athletically. So from a competition standpoint, I just didn't know really if I was good. I knew I was good in Alaska, but I didn't know if I was good anywhere else. And so that concerned me a little bit. And then I'm such a creature of habit when it came to growing up with some snow and some, summertime was, not, outrageous. It was beautiful in Alaska, but, like I said, 55 and drizzly is my kind of day. And I just thought, man, I can't go to Hawaii and wake up to the beach and sunshine 24/7. Like, it would drive me crazy. Great place to visit. I didn't want to live there. And then I just didn't know if Idaho was a 1AA school at the time, and the Big Sky in Hawaii was a WAC school. They were a bigger school. I just didn't know if I could compete, to be honest with you. And I thought, well, if I go to Idaho, at least I'll be able to play. I'll play, 3-4 years or whatever it is. And that's all I really wanted to do was to play. So that's kind of how I made the choice, and it worked out really well for me.
Mark, this time of year leading up to a Super Bowl, fans, media tend to reminisce about previous Super Bowl winners. And the 1991 Washington Redskins, to me, and I think the guys would agree, seem to be a very underrated Super Bowl winner, bearing in mind only 9 sacks given up by the offensive line throughout the season, third best in NFL history. But yeah, don't seem to get the kudos, you probably deserve.
Yeah, that was a great team. As a matter of fact, oftentimes if you go through, rating the Super Bowl champions, that team is in the top 3 or 4. And for a long time, it was rated the number 1 team by USA Today, rated it number 1 team in Super Bowl history. And we didn't have, we had Mark Rippon, and he had a tremendous season, but he's not, your prototypical kind of superstar quarterback. But I think we're still one of the only teams in NFL history, maybe the only team in NFL history that had like a top 5 defense and a top 5 offense. I mean, we were an outstanding football team with a ton of depth. Early in the season, I think we had probably in the first 5 or 6 games of the season, we had 3 shutouts on defense, and we ran through the playoffs. We beat the Atlanta Falcons, I believe, 24-7, and then we beat the Detroit Lions like 45-10, and then we beat up on the Bills in the Super Bowl, and the score was 37-24, but we gave them a couple courtesy touchdowns at the end because we felt sorry for them. So it really wasn't a close game, to be truthful with everybody.
Mark, I tell you, if you
My
like
dog
the weather,
can you hear my dog is really excited to be a part on this Ireland show. He's
don't worry, man. It's all
is it an Irish red setter or anything, Mark? Maybe harken
What's
back
that?
home. Is it an Irish red setter? He's harking for back home.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what we're gonna go with. He's an Irish red setter there.
I was going to say, Mark, I mean, if you like the weather, 55 and a bit drizzly, you definitely love Ireland. I can say that. And you definitely love it with a few pints at some stage. But talking about the O-line, especially, I suppose, at that Washington team, because we've had a couple of O-line guys on lately, Alex Mack, Graham Glasgow, and they always talk about that band of brothers, that kind of innate teamwork you need on the offensive line. But that Washington team, that wasn't just any offensive line. I mean, that was the Washington Hogs. They've gone down in history as one of the greatest position groups of all time, obviously under the great coach in Joe Bugle. I mean, what does that mean to you to be kind of associated one of that clan effectively?
I've had two great groups and a bunch of great coaches. Actually, Bugle had left and Jim Hannafin took over that line, but he's a legend in the NFL as well. And when you think about 19 games over the course of a 16-game season and 3 playoff games, to give up 9 sacks in 19 games is, a record that will go down in history. I don't know that will ever be broken, but, incredible to be a part of that group and also to be a part of the group here in Denver that, went to back-to-back world championships and blocked for Terrell Davis, who was a 2,000-yard rusher. So, those things you take a lot of pride in, and it's the teamwork, it's the coming together of guys and the bonding together. We cannot be productive unless we're all completely tied together. And it's funny because I always tell people, when it comes to the offensive line, it is this team within a team. It's like this secret mushroom society. We're the only guys that know what we're actually doing. No, even the head coach has no idea what we're doing. And so there's a real bond, a real tightness that goes with playing with one another. And it's funny. I flew home from Royston, Georgia, last night. I buried a former teammate of mine, Tony Jones, who was a great player. 13, 14-year NFL career, Pro Bowl, All-Pro left tackle, right tackle, played with me here in Denver and passed away just a couple of days ago. And very sad, but it's amazing the bond that you have, that sacrifice for one another. And a fish belly white kid from Anchorage, Alaska, and a black man from Royston, Georgia, can be eternally bonded together through their belief in Christ and their love for one another and the sacrifice that they made for one another. And so, it's amazing. There's a lot more that connects us than separates us. And one of the things I loved about playing offensive line was you can get guys from all kinds of different backgrounds, all kinds of different, economic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, geographic backgrounds, north, south, east, and west, and they come together. And to be good, they have to all sacrifice for one another, and they have to bond together. And that's one thing I love about playing offensive line is that mentality of I'll take full responsibility for everything that goes wrong, and I will always put everybody else in front of myself. And to be good, you have to have that attitude. And I was blessed to be a part of some really great offensive lines, and that's the thing that connected them all together. Is every guy was unselfish. Every guy, like I always say, the most beautiful part or the most beautiful thing in the world is to be in a meeting on Monday when somebody gives up a sack, and to watch guys scramble to take responsibility for giving up that sack. It's not like, hey man, it was his fault. He didn't do this. It was like, I'll take that, man. Give it to me. You're fighting. Like, we'll be literally in the meeting fighting, like screaming at each other to take responsibility to take a bad grade. I'll take the bad grade. That was mine. Like, I didn't drag, I got off that block too soon and I left my center out to dry, and the left tackle be like, no, man, I kicked out too fast. That's 100% my, like 3-4 guys, like literally ready to go to fisticuffs to take responsibility for a bad grade. You want to talk about the ultimate in don't point the finger, pull the thumb. It is a thumb pulling room. That is my fault. I'll take 100% responsibility. And that's what I love about playing that position. And that's why it's so unique. And that's why, a lot of people can't make it there.
And you've sort of mentioned it there as well, Mark, that transition to going to Denver to play with arguably one of the best quarterbacks and running back cores there ever in John Elway and Terrell Davis. How did that move come about? What was the background of that? Can you even talk about the move and the transition to Denver?
Well, so I had played that Super Bowl in 1991 season, and in 1992 I played the entire season. I hurt my knee and my elbow, and started all 16 games, but I needed surgery from day one, so I wasn't practicing. I wasn't doing anything. I just was playing in the games, and like there was times on Saturday where like I literally couldn't put my hand down on the ground. My elbow was so bad, and like I could barely walk. And then I start and play the whole game on Sundays. And so anyhow, right after the 92 season, I had surgery on both my elbow and my knee, and was laid up, was in a kind of crutches for 10 weeks. And I had this a procedure called a microfracture in my knee. And anyhow, long story short, Joe Gibbs retired, and Richie Pettibone took over. And in then 1993, I had a sickness called GBS. It's an autoimmune Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I lost all the feeling in my arms and legs for. I started feeling sick at the beginning of the year before training camp, and then by October, I'd lost all the feeling in my arms and legs, and pretty much for 6 months had no feeling in my arms and legs, and it was a long rehab. And so I came back. That was 93, and I missed half the season. I came back in 94. When I went into camp, I was 268 pounds because I hadn't put my weight back on. And I wasn't 100% by any stretch. I hadn't gained my strength back, and Norv Turner had taken over the team. And anyhow, I started the first couple games of the season. Then I got in a rotation with a guy by the name of John Giesick, and then he got hurt, and then I ended up starting the last part of the season, last 6 games of the season or so. And I started getting my strength back. I started playing well again. And at that point, the Redskins told me, hey, we're not interested in re-signing you. And so then it was like, all right, well, now I got to go find a job. It was only 6 years in for me. And so then I started traveling around. I got a lot of interest around the league, but I kept failing physicals. So I failed a physical in Chicago because my knee was so bad. I failed a physical in Indianapolis. I failed a physical in Atlanta, where the doctor in Atlanta told me my left knee, I had the knee of a 90-year-old woman, is what he said, which I think is a it's an affront to 90-year-old women. That just seems mean. Anyhow, long story short, I went to Denver and they passed me. They were going to pass me regardless. Mike Shanahan just said, pass him. He just plays on Sundays. So that's how I got to Denver after failing 3 physicals. And so just thankful that that Mike Shanahan had enough belief in me to say, you know, we know you're going to play. And I owe him a debt of gratitude. I played another 6 years after Washington told me I was done and I couldn't play anymore. Won another couple Super Bowls, went to another Pro Bowl. And a lot of that has to do with Mike and the way he managed my body. He took care of me. You know, we had a guy by the name of, you know, it's funny, speaking of offensive lines, it's funny the lessons you learn through life if you open your eyes and, you know, kind of open your aperture and actually get away from yourself and your own selfishness and look at what other people do and how they respond. I had a teammate by the name of Dave Diaz-Infante, who coaches in the league now, and we're dearest of friends. And he was nicknamed, his moniker when I played in Denver was the stunt guard, because Dave practiced for me all week and then I started on Sunday. And it's funny because you would think that that would be a recipe for animosity, right? Like you do all the work and I get all the glory. And yet we were best of friends. We were roommates. We studied together. We prepared together. He prepared me during the week through practice and what he saw. And I watched him and tried to help him get better. And it was a true partnership. My starting and my playing was a true partnership because Dave did most of the heavy lifting for me. You know, I would take a play here, maybe 2 plays over here, but it was the way that the Broncos could manage my body so that I could play on Sundays. And again, you know, you talk about selflessness and what it takes to be a championship organization and a championship team. And there's a guy that did all the dirty work and never, ever got any of the accolades and never got a chance to play. And was an incredibly vital part of us winning multiple, you know, back-to-back world championships for what he did, you know, for my career. So, like I said, you know, that's part of playing that offensive line, part of being in that room, and why it's just a unique and special, position.
And Mark, I suppose every Broncos fan is, you know, I mean, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Shanahan, but particularly in terms of how he managed your career. Going into the Super Bowl 32 on your 32nd birthday, and the NFC had lorded it over the AFC, I think 13 on the bounce, and some pretty, they'd bullied really their way. The Broncos as underdogs. I suppose your reflections on your Super Bowl appearances, and obviously there's 32 against the Packers, and then the following year, and obviously that famous photograph that gets talked about a lot.
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, Super Bowl 32 was a, you know, it was interesting, kind of one, because we played Green Bay in December in Green Bay in 1996, and we had locked everything up. It was late in December, and we had locked everything up. And so we had a bunch of guys that were injured. I had a knee injury or a knee surgery the week before I played, because that's what I did. But Gary Zimmerman missed the game with a shoulder surgery, and we had Terrell Davis didn't play. Aaron Craver started at tailback for us, and Elway didn't play. Bill Musgrave started, and we had half of our offense out, and a bunch of key defensive players out, and they beat us down. I mean, they beat us like 42-7 or something. And that was the previous year. And there was an arrogance about the Green Bay Packers. They had won the Super Bowl the year before, but there was an arrogance, and I think a lot of that arrogance came from the fact that they beat us down so bad in that December game. And I really believe that they completely underestimated who we were. We're like, you guys didn't beat us. You beat our JV team. Like that was not us. And so there was a real feeling of confidence about what our plan was. And one of the things we did, I was talking to Brett Favre about this a couple of months ago, and we were talking about that game and the disappointment he had. And I said, we had studied your defense, and we came in, and Mike Shanahan said, this is how we're going to gut these guys. And so we got into a slot formation. So we got into like I right, which is fullback, tailback, tight end on the right-hand side, I right slot. So the Z goes from the strong side into the slot on the weak side, and the X is out there. And so anytime you got into that formation, one of their adjustments was the weak side linebacker, his name was Brian Williams, would get what I call a 1-by-1 hip. So he would get a yard deeper and a yard wider to take away, he's trying to take away the slant. And their safety, Leroy Butler, would come screaming down. And so basically they were exchanging responsibilities. Brian Williams, who was a skinny, he's a 225-pound outside linebacker who could really run. He literally became the safety, and Leroy Butler became the will linebacker. And so Mike is showing us the film of how many times, they would, on the backside when they were running strong, they would just, everybody would kind of scoop, or the guard and the tackle would work a double team to the backside will linebacker who's literally playing safety. And Leroy Butler was just coming down and tackling practice in the backfield. And every time you get into it, you'd be in, next thing you know, you're down, it's second down and 13 because Leroy Butler tackled you in the backfield. And Mike was just like, hey, we're going to exchange that. We're going to make the will the safety, and the safety is going to become the will. And so we're going to block that guy. And we absolutely eviscerated them in the run game. We got in that formation. I can't tell you how many times we got in that formation, and every time it was identical. And every time we just gutted them in that formation. And they they didn't have any clue what we were doing. And we're just putting helmets, guards on Leroy Butler, right? We're just putting helmets on him, and we're getting cut back lanes, and Terrell's ripping, 8-yard gains and 9-yard gains. And it was a great plan. Because in that game, Elway was really, Elway didn't really, he completed 50% of his balls, or 47% of it. He really was not, he was not the factor in that game. It was the running game. And so anyhow, long story short, that was a phenomenal game plan. And we had so much confidence going into that game. We knew they didn't think we could run on them. We knew we'd run it down their throats. And of course it worked out in our favor. And then that picture you talked about, Super Bowl 33, where we ran a QB draw, and Elway, takes a shotgun snap, sets, and then boom, takes off. And we're as he's changing, I'm trying to invite my guy to rush up the field as Elway takes off. Obviously he adjusts, and so I'm trying to drive him into the end zone, and we all kind of fall in this massive humanity in the goal line, and it was this real poignant kind of moment, like we just won back-to-back Super Bowls, like they're not coming back from this. And I think it was probably early in the fourth quarter or whatever it was, and we're face to face, smashed on the goal line, and bodies are on top of us, so we can't move. Both our helmets are just touching; they're connecting. And Elway is looking at me like, "Oh my gosh, can you believe we just won this? Won another Super Bowl back to back." So it had this real important kind of just important, really heavy face about him. And I looked at him, and he was like expecting something more than what I gave him. I just said, "Hi, buddy. How you doing?" And he starts laughing. He goes, "You are an idiot." And, because it was just expecting some real hardcore football, breakdown or something. I don't know. So anyhow, that is an iconic picture. And people send it to me all the time to autograph it and do all that kind of stuff.
Mark, I'm fortunate that my teenage years I got to experience watching John Elway and Terrell Davis playing. Just, is there any particular insights in your time playing with them? Any great stories or memories you want to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, Elway, like, he never cussed you out. He never yelled at anybody. The only time Elway ever raised his voice is when we got a play in late. We had to run up to the line of scrimmage and snap the ball. But there was just there's a confidence about John Elway when he walked into the huddle. Like, you could be down 14, and it just was, you just had this feeling of, we got them right where we want them. Like, we're about ready to open a can of whoop ass on these guys, right? And so there was always just that confidence about John. Terrell, from the day he got in from training camp, Terrell, we went to Japan to play a game in Japan, one of the America Bowls, and Terrell was 6th on the depth chart. I mean, I didn't even know who he was. Nobody knew him. And so he literally tried, while we were in Japan, to leave. He tried to get a ticket home because he's like, I'm 6th on the depth chart. I'm not going to make it in the NFL. And the language barrier, he couldn't get out of Japan. He couldn't speak the language, and the people at the hotel didn't understand what he was trying to do. And, they just knew he was with the team that was there. And so he ended up not being able to get himself a ticket home out of Japan. So he ends up going to the game. And in the fourth quarter, we run kickoff cover, and they put him in kickoff cover, and he runs down and literally blows some dude up. We're playing the Niners. I mean, just absolutely smashes this guy on kickoff cover. And we're on the sideline going crazy. All the starters are out, and we just call him the Rook. And so we go to Bobby Turner, go, put the Rook in, put him in, put him in, put him in. We're all yelling at Mike Shanahan, put him in. So they put him in, and he just starts ripping off 6-yard runs, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And so we're all cheering this kid, the Rook. By the end of training camp, we ended up cutting our starter and our backup. Our starter was Rod Bernstein, and I can't remember, we cut another guy that was the backup running back because this kid showed so much potential. He ended up rushing for like 1,100 yards his first year. He just got better and better and better. And then in 1998, when we're going for 2000, we're playing the Seattle Seahawks. We went into the last week of the season, and Terrell needed like 177 yards to get 2,000. And I didn't even know he had a rib injury, right? Not that I knew. I didn't care. Like, we were like, that was on us. We're getting him 2,000 yards. Like, this is just something that's going to happen. It's going to happen regardless. And it was so cool because every time he'd run the ball, and as we start getting kind of into the third quarter, every time he'd run the ball, we'd all yell over to the sideline, like, how many does he need? And there was a dude with a grease board, that had like, that he was just keeping tally. So every time he needs, 68 yards, and he hold it up. And so we were, there was no way we were going to leave that game without him getting, over 2,000 yards. And so we were just screaming to the sideline every time, run the ball. How many more yards? What does he need? And just really cool. Again, that dynamic of everybody fighting for one guy to get something that's really special, but we all share in it, So they were just great. They were great teammates, great players, obviously Hall of Famers to be sure.
Yeah, Mark, I'm kind of dwelling on the fact you say Terrell Davis was 6th on the depth chart, and obviously he was drafted in the 6th round. So there's a nice symmetry there. And for any of our younger viewers, I mean, that Super Bowl 32 you're alluding to, I mean, Terrell Davis ran for, I think, about 157 yards and 3 touchdowns. As you say, I mean, you were running all over the Packers in that game, and he was the engine powered by you guys on the O-line. But I want to draw your attention to some other legendary people you've been involved with. Obviously, in a 12-year season, so to a 12-year career over those seasons, you worked not only with, obviously, Mike Shanahan, as you've alluded to, but also Joe Gibbs back with the Redskins as well. So, I mean, both of them are legendary coaches. How similar or different were they? And do you have any stories now, I suppose, after a few years retired that you can share in safety about them?
Yeah. I mean, both very driven, obviously, meticulous game planners. So and both of them understood kind of an identity. I think one of the things you get into when like I call games for Fox now, and some of the differences between the really good teams and the very average teams are, in my mind, it's an identity. It's a philosophy you can always hang your hat on. So every week you're going to game plan and you're going to, scheme up runs or scheme up passes based upon what defense the opponent runs, right? But you have to have an identity, something that you can hang your hat on. I think this goes for life as well. A set of tenets that you believe in that you're not going to deviate from. And in the NFL, to me, if every week you have to scheme something, if that's your plan, then you don't have an identity. And it's really hard when push comes to shove to be great. And the great teams, to me, understand what they are, what they're good at. And it may change from year to year based on the personnel they have, but they understand that. And Joe Gibbs and Mike Shanahan were very much that way. They were exquisite game planners, taking somebody's weakness and using that against them. But the thing that I really appreciated was they would never take or attack a weakness of the opponent if it exposed our weakness. So, like, they're not going to trade blow for blow that way. So if there's a weakness that we have and it's going to be exposed by attacking their weakness, we'll find a different weakness, but we're never going to expose our weaknesses. So I think they were very astute game planners, but really astute, almost psychologists of what their team was and what was going to give them the best chance to be successful and to dominate. And those are the things that I just really appreciated about them. Joe Gibbs is one of the most regal men I've ever been around. He's just a great man, and Mike has just become such a good friend and such a mentor. And it's funny, one of the things that I did when I left ESPN and I went to Fox to call games was I reached out to Mike and I said, "Hey man, you need to help me see the game through more of the lens of a coach as opposed to the lens of a player." So as a player, I mean, is the most popular sport in your guys' country, is it soccer? Would that be the most popular sport that everybody plays?
In Ireland, there's Gaelic football, rugby, and soccer. So there's a different type of football or soccer. But yeah,
okay.
Pretty much.
So whatever you play, whatever position you play, like if you're a goaltender or you're a forward or whatever it is, when you watch the game, I always say you watch it through the straw hole. You watch it through a straw hole. You watch your position, and you're an expert at that position. And so that's kind of just naturally where your eyes gravitate to. And I knew that about myself. I knew that I have a real heavy expertise on the line of scrimmage and defensive front sevens and offensive line. But I want to have an expertise on everything. And so I ended up hooking up with Mike. I go over to Mike's house and we just study film. Well, we watch film and he walks me through, hey, here's a play that everybody runs. And this is how this play came into it, how this play was designed. It used to be run this way. Now we run it this way. This is how it's changed from the time I was coaching you to now. And then we watch cut-ups of his son, Kyle Shanahan, who coaches for the Niners. And he's the head coach of the Niners. And we watch game film and game footage. And Mike is unrelenting. Like, the guy is the most driven dude. And we will sit and watch one concept. Like, I sat in his office one day and we watched this concept called branch. And all branch is like if you run and branch to the strong side and you're a 2x2 formation. So you outside Z receiver and a Y. The Z receiver runs a go and the Y runs an 8-yard out breaking route. And that's called branch. And its stick is a 5 to 6 yard out route, right? by the tight end, that's a stick route. So it's just the evolution is stick. Oh, we run it deeper, it's branch. So that's how football works. It's pretty simple. We watched branch. I'm not kidding. Go 8-yard out route, right? And you can run it out of strong or weak. You can run it out of an F and a Z or F and an X. You can motion it back out and run it out of, you can run it out of anything you want, right? So you can motion the back out wide, and you can put the Z receiver in a close split, or you can put the X receiver in a nasty split and motion the back out wide. The back can run the go and the X. So you run X branch, and the back runs the go. So you can run it any way you want, right? It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. We watched that play, and I'm not kidding you, for 2 hours. Just that play for 2 hours. Well, and like after about the 40th time we watched branch, I was like, that's the same one we just watched 39 other times. Yep, for 2 hours we just watched branch, but I go over to his house, and he gives me his iPad. It's funny, like he'll give me his iPad and he'll have all these cut-ups from practice from the Niners, and he goes, go watch all this stuff, and then let's get back together next week. So I'm watching all the stuff that he's downloaded on his iPad, and his iPad, it's like a who's who of football royalty. Like I get text message, it's Bill Belichick, it's that, diddly, 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 diddly. It's Jerry Rice is texting, so-and-so is and it is like a who's who. I mean, I was just like, if I wasn't an honest person, I would have just stole every number out of his contact list on his iPad, because there's some incredible people that I was like, I should have that number. But I didn't do it. But anyhow, he's just so gracious with his time and with his expertise and his knowledge, and he stays on top of the game. He's just a phenomenal coach.
I think we sound like Mark. You sound like a guy that could be the next producer of the show, getting some people on. It sounds good there. All those texts. Mark, you've been very generous with your time. You're talking about watching Branch for 2 hours. We've got one more question each. Is that okay, or do you have to bounce Saturday morning, or is that?
Yeah, I got plenty. I got nothing but time.
Sweet. So, my next question is this: when I was 1 year old, you were playing in London with the Redskins in 1992, and then you didn't play. You were on the broadcast team in 2019, the Bears against the Raiders in that new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Could you believe the evolution of the international game when you went to that new stadium, a field that's specifically designed for the NFL?
Yeah, it was incredible, and just driving through London to get to that game. It's funny, when we played in Old Wembley, and we dressed in a gymnasium across the street, and we walked across the street and then walked down into the stadium to play, right? It was like playing, back when you played at Pop Warner, like just stand on the side, just stand in the end zone during halftime and eat orange slices, right? It was cool. And when you're a player, you're so sequestered, and you don't really get to see the city, and you practice all day, and then you get back to the hotel, and your wife wants to go see a show or wants to go eat, and you're just like, Lord have mercy, I don't want to do anything but lay in this bed. So as a broadcaster, man, I got to see a little bit more of London. I went to Churchill Museum, and I just walked through the park, and I walked around the city, and it was fascinating to me. But driving to the stadium to call the game on Sunday, and rolling down to Tottenham, and we're on the main drag there, and we're a mile away or whatever, and just seeing every jersey represented, like every jersey in the NFL, from the Jaguars to the Giants to the all walking toward Tottenham Stadium to just go enjoy this game. And the stadium was just absolutely gorgeous. I just had a blast hanging with the crew, and sleep was hard because I was always I'd fall asleep at 9 and I was up at 2:30 in the morning watching film. You know, like what else am I going to do? But we had an absolute blast doing the game, and like I said, the fans were just incredible. And it's amazing how it's grown internationally. How many people love our game.
Mark, you touched on it earlier in terms of some of the injuries you had, but I think it was 29 surgeries in total. Like lesser players would have given up much earlier. Where did the resilience like come from? Is that something that was instilled by your parents, or you just kept coming back?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any other options really. I mean, I always wanted to be a football player. That's the only thing I wanted to do since the time I was 12. And I was told, my entire life that I wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, I grew up in Alaska. Nobody from Alaska goes to the NFL. I went to the University of Idaho. Nobody goes, to the NFL, or, it just was one of those things that, that was always kind of odds stacked against you. And then to have all the injuries that I had, it became, I guess, a game within a game to me. Like how poorly can I feel? How badly can I be hurt? And how good can I still play? And I wore that as a badge of honor. I've shown up to games on literally on crutches on Saturday and played played 65 plays and whipped ass and took names. It just was always one of those things that I took a lot of pride in. And I think one of the things that was always really apparent to me was I always had an attitude of selflessness. I always had an attitude of every guy on this team is more important than me. And it is my responsibility from the equipment managers on down. It is my responsibility to love them, to care for them, to be a part of their lives. And it's my responsibility to play for them regardless of how I feel. And that was, I took that very seriously. I always looked at it, almost like biblically from Philippians chapter 2, when Paul is writing to the church of Philippi and talks about, having one mind, one spirit, united in love, do nothing out of selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, treat others as more important than self. And that was always kind of my, you want to call it my personal mission statement. That was part of who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be about. And like I said, I took that very seriously. And it's probably the reason I was able to line up and, line up and play regardless of how I felt. And I always thought this too, is it's anybody can play when they feel good. I'm going to whip your ass when I feel like shit. That's how I always approached it. And like I said, it was just it was more to me a badge of honor, and it was a way to represent my team, but it was also a way to kind of sacrifice for my teammates, to kind of almost to show them how much I love them and how much I care for them.
Mark, you've touched on the fact that you're now covering games for Fox, and you've made the transition from being a player into the media side of things. Just looking ahead to the big game in Tampa, what's your general overall thoughts on the game and the matchup between the Chiefs and the Bucs?
Yeah, I mean, it really is one of the premier defenses in Tampa Bay versus one of the premier offenses in Kansas City. And really interesting because Tampa Bay, they're so fast. All three levels of their defense, their defensive line, their outside guys with Shaq Barrett and JPP, Jason Pierre-Paul. Their inside linebackers, the two duo of Devin White and Levante David are as good as there is. Their safeties in Whitehead and Antoine Winfield Jr., who's a rookie, are amazing. They play with three corners. Very, very underrated, very aggressive, very physical, very underrated cover corners. They just bring pressure. They bring blitz pressure. You know, and when I was in Washington, and Joe Bugle used to say this all the time. He said, "Hey, man, we beg them to blitz us because you live by the blitz and you die by the blitz. And if you know how to pick up the blitz, I'm sorry, you're gonna get eviscerated if you're good at it. If you understand the timing of it, the timing of blitz to me is really important. And if you can affect the quarterback's throw on the fourth step of your blitz, you're gonna have success. If you can make, as an offense, if you can get that guy off his route, if you can chip him enough to get him off his route, or if you can quick snap him so he's a step and a half behind before he hits his spot, then you're gonna destroy, you know, the defense. And so Tampa is exceptional with their blitz packages, the way they run. They are as good as there is in this league. Great at stopping the run. And I just believe that Kansas City is maybe the best I've ever seen at picking it all up and having a quarterback that can absolutely destroy you. So, like, that is, to me, that is the great matchup in this game. If I was pressed, I would probably pick Kansas City. But you know, it really comes down to me is how do they deal with that? How do they deal with Tampa's defense, and can Tampa's defense make enough plays? Because they're one of those teams that really believes in, hey, we're going to give up 2 or 3 big plays. They're going to hurt us, but we're going to make 6 or 7. And, you know, we're going to win that battle. We're going to get 6. We're going to give up 2. That's a +4 in our mind. That's a couple of turnovers. That's maybe a defensive score or a real short field for our offense. That's how they play the game. And if Kansas City can pick it up and flip that script and win 6-2 on the other side of that and make 6 big plays, then they're unbeatable when they play that way. So I'll pick Kansas City, but that to me is the most interesting matchup of the game.
Mark, I love your quote actually from Philippians, because I think it was in chapter 4. There's a great quote as well, as my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus. And you have been fantastic today, and thank you so much for your time. I want to leave you with one small thought, which is, not only have you had great glory in Christ and obviously in your career, but to me, Mark, I think I'm going to think of you as Lionel Richie going forward, because you're built like a brick house. You can block all night long, and you're not one, you're not twice, you're 3 times a Super Bowl winner. Thank you so much for your time today, mate. It's been fantastic.
I've never been compared to Lionel Richie, but I will take it. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You guys are awesome.
Awesome. Mark Schlereth, thanks very much, man. And you can tell DMAC that on Monday morning about Lionel Richie, and tell us as well.
Yes, I will. I will definitely say that. I'll put that on my radio show here shortly.
Thanks for your time, Mark. I really appreciate your time, and you're very generous.
Yep. Anytime. Be well. Glad to be able to hook up.
Hi, folks. Welcome to Super Moments, Stories of the Big Game, brought to you by Carry Out Off License, your place for big nights in. If you're looking to stock up ahead of Sunday's big night, Carry Out has some great offers at the moment, including Blossom Hill wine, which is now €7.99 each. An 18-pack of Miller, 330ml, which is €19.99. An 8-pack of Budweiser, 500ml, which is now €13.99. White Claw, 330ml 4-pack range is €9.99. And you can check out Carry Out Off License on Facebook for more. Okay, folks, welcome back to Super Moments, Stories of the Big Game. Looking at great moments from the big game all week long, going ahead of Super Sunday on the Irish NFL Show, 4 p.m. this Sunday. Today we're looking at a Super Bowl that happened in 2014, and it was between the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos. And that's all I'm going to say as a Broncos fan. I'm going to pass it over to Seahawks fan Nick to maybe try and tell us what happened. Nick, how would you describe that game?
Fantastic, in one word. It was an unbelievable experience. It was probably the 2nd or 3rd Super Bowl that I'd watched. I'd watched Russell Wilson and the Seahawks be knocked out of the playoffs the year before, and so I followed them then for this season. And you know, Russell Wilson, the leads in the boom. What a team to follow. But watching that game here in Lurgan, in a pub that's actually now burnt to the ground, funny enough, when that first snap went over Peyton Manning's head and that set the tone for that whole game, it was just unbelievable. The Seahawks were relentless. Russell Wilson was a bit, cagey to start. I remember he missed like a wide open pass to the flat for his first throw, and thinking the occasion has got to him. But from there on, I mean, every single time they got the ball, they looked like scoring. Percy Harvin had an unbelievable jet sweep that went for nearly 70 yards, just shy of a score. The second half kickoff took back for a touchdown. That's the second time in 2 years that had happened. It had happened the year before as well. But from the Seahawks' point of view, I just couldn't believe how often we scored, how well we kept Peyton Manning and co in check, and words sometimes escape you when you try to describe how good it was. Mind you, the year after, 49 wasn't too good, but 48 was a good one, and one that will be remembered.
And for me, it was one that was remembered for the wrong reasons, and I think after that season, Colin, we really thought that we were going to win that game, and I think everybody thought Peyton Manning was going to get us right.
Yeah, well, I mean, the worry though was always that it was a cold Super Bowl, and Peyton at his age. Being a Broncos fan, though, the thing is that's not even our worst loss in the Super Bowl. So you're kind of get immune to it. Like, we got beaten 55-10 by the 49ers. We got beaten 42-10 by the Washington football team. The Giants put almost 20 points on us. So we're really good at getting to Super Bowls and getting absolutely obliterated. I remember watching it in the wool shed in Dublin, sat down, was there, and I ordered chicken wings. They arrived. As they went down in front of me, the ball went over Peyton Manning's head. Fastest score in Super Bowl history. Knew it was going to be a long night from there. But the wings were really good.
And you probably could have done with a carry-out at that point, from carry-out off license, I think, in that sense. But Brian, it was an interesting game, I guess, for the neutral, wasn't it? Did you enjoy a blowout as a neutral?
No, I was also in the Woolshed that night, and I think by and large most fans knew by the end of the fourth quarter realistically the game was probably over. It didn't start too well. We saw it recently actually in the playoff game, Steelers-Browns, similar kind of play, albeit the Browns scored a touchdown, and the game goes that kind of way after that. And one thing I always think about, albeit not necessarily around the game, the hype about the first ever cold Super Bowl and the fact that it was in New York and everything that came with that, and it was such an anticlimax. I mean, there was people leaving the Woolshed early in the third quarter, and having been there for so many Super Bowls to the very end, as Mark knows, where the Giants have thankfully beaten Patriots twice, and other games that have gone down to the death, such as the Saints and the Colts in 2000 and 2010. But for that particular game, it was for what was a very good season and a very good championship round of games where the Seahawks beat the 49ers, and the 49ers nearly won the game at the very end in Seattle. For the final to end in that way was disappointing, but I think in fairness to Seattle, they were the best team that season by far.
And Mark, we're talking there about Carrier and his great offers ahead of the Super Bowl, obviously an 18-pack of Miller, which is now €19.99. Von Miller didn't show up that night in New York, did he, Mark?
Unfortunately, Michael, too few people for the Denver Broncos showed up at all. They showed up when they got off the team bus. You have to put this in context as well. Remember, this was an historic team that year. 55 touchdowns for Peyton Manning. First time in NFL history that four of receivers had caught more than 10 touchdowns in a season. You had Welker, you had some amazing players on that Denver Broncos side that time. And, going into the game, there was all this talk about, it's number one offense against number one defense, number one offense against number one defense. And the old adage is defense wins championships. And usually the number one defense does come out on top in that regard. Peyton Manning, it wasn't just the first snap. And yes, it set the tone for the game, but 2 interceptions in the first half. Another pick six in a Super Bowl. He has a habit, seemingly. At the time, of course, the stat was, and we might come to a Super Bowl later in these shows that broke this stat, but the stat was if the quarterback threw a pick six, the team went on to lose the game. And this was another epitome of it. And look, it was such a tonking. It's almost like the game isn't that much worth talking about. I know Mick would want to relive every play, but 36-0 down into the third quarter. For the general neutral in this type of Super Bowl, it was switch off time. It was drink some more beer from carry out off license. It was, just kick back and maybe even for us in Ireland, get some sleep at that point, because it was very clear how it was going. I think the Broncos are responsible for 3 of the 4 worst Super Bowl losses of all time. Only the Cowboys obliteration of the Bills kind of stops them from a clean sweep. But it was, in fairness, one of the greatest obliterations in the last 20 years of Super Bowl by one of the greatest offenses, against one of the greatest offenses of the last 20 years.
I remember sitting in Madrid at 4 a.m. in the morning, 2 weeks before that, the end of January in 2014, and Richard Sherman was speaking to Aaron Andrews. And you started to think, whenever Kaepernick was down, I think Kaepernick got very close to winning that game. He had the ball. The 49ers could have arguably got to that game. And look, I think what Mark said there is a fair point, but there's a lot of people as well that would argue, I know the Broncos got over the line 2 years later, but a lot of people would argue that, for some people, that 50th game wouldn't have been the most entertaining for a neutral, because it was very defensively minded. And you look at the games, for example, the Patriots, the Rams as well. Brian, have you any more points to add before we go?
Yeah, one other memory of that game is, when you get to my age group, early 40s, a friend of mine who was a Broncos fan for a long time, and he lost interest because the coverage went off for a while. But when it came to that Super Bowl, he contacted me and said, "What's the plans?" I said, "We're going to the Woodshed." Came in, and I gave him 3 hours on how Peyton Manning had done X, Y, Z all season, and that the Broncos were definitely going to win. And he hadn't watched the game in 5 or 6 years. And by the end of the first quarter, he was saying to me, "Do you really know what you're talking about?"
I ask that question every Sunday at 9 a.m. to Brian before I'm joking. Mark, final point, and then to add on that big game.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, the big game's coming ahead to later this week, and of course, legends will be made, and some people will come out with exceptional performances and end up getting paid massively in free agency. That game spawned, other than Papa John and Adam Gase, the other person that Peyton Manning has done more for their financial bank balance for was Malcolm Smith, who returned one of those picks, 69 yards in that game, and signed a massive free agent deal after that. So Peyton likes sharing the wealth a bit as well.
Probably 2 incredible defenses, that Seahawks defense that year and that Broncos defense 2 years later in the big game. But for now, boys, I've got my caveat. A big thanks to Caveat Off License, your place for big nights in. You can check out the Irish NFL Show Super Sunday 4 p.m. 4-hour extravaganza with ridiculous amounts of guests. But in the meantime, check out Pundit Arena Irish NFL Show on both Twitter and Facebook. We've got a giveaway for a carry-out voucher. Check it out, and thanks for watching.